And really, sorry. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to send them in the chat or direct them specifically to Tanya. Thank you.
Yes, all right. Okay, well, again, I am really excited to be here today and to talk about leadership and self-care in your life. And like Liz said, my name is Merivet Lombera, or you can call me Meri as well. And I'm really excited to share my knowledge and my experience with these two topics because I think it's really important to understand leadership and self-care and how that looks like in your life. And so let's get started. Let me just go to the next slide. So the purpose of this presentation is for you to identify how leadership presents in your life and also to understand self-care, because I know that, these two terms, leadership and self-care, get thrown around so much. And I want us to take a time to have conversation and to learn more about these two terms. Some of the goals that I have for us today is to have a conversation about leadership. That's like the first goal. And then the second goal is to learn and discuss what self-care is and what it is not. So, but before we get started, I do want to talk a little bit about myself because like all of you know that I'm here as the Alianza statewide coordinator, but today I want to be here more on a personal level. And so I was born in Michoacan, Mexico, and I am a first generation college student, like Liz read for all of you. I graduated from Central Washington University this past spring, and I obtained a psychology degree in a bachelor's degree in psychology and communication, and I also decided to major in business administration. Some of the things that bring me joy are running outdoors, reading nonfiction books. I also really enjoy hiking. This is a picture of me hiking. It was a really pretty lake. I also really enjoy spending time with family and loved ones and hanging out with friends, having like really deep, profound conversations. Those type of things bring me a lot of joy. Um, and so let's get started with this presentation because, when you work in an environment where you have to work with people all the time, it is really important to understand leadership and how that looks like in your life and in the workplace, right? So let's begin by talking about leadership. And for today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the chat box. I am going to use the chat box. Just gonna open it up here on my computer. There it is. Okay, so you're gonna be chatting with me. I will give you all access to chat. And then I'll just be reading off the comments or anything that comes up. So to begin, before I talk about leadership or before we go more into depth, I want to hear from you. Where have you heard the word leader or leadership? So feel free to write something on the box and I'll read it off as they come. So where have you heard leadership or leader? Where have you heard those terms? I see some responses here. It says Alianza, school, sports, work, books, movies, in school, at school. Yes, these are really good places where you hear a lot of the term leader or leadership. I read sports again. Yeah, I think this term, the term leadership or leader, does come up in all of these different spaces, right? And so now let me ask you, what does leadership mean to you? And again, feel free to chat with me through the chat box and I'll be reading off the responses. So we'll wait a little to see what are some of those responses that people are sending in. So what does leader or leadership mean to you? It's a lot more complex. I think it is knowing and being confident in your role or person, even if you aren't at the forefront. Great leadership means being inclusive and working as a team, leading by example. Okay? Someone who stands up for something, someone or a community, someone wise, speaking out for people. All right. These are really good definitions or ideas that you have about leadership. Keep them coming. Okay. Well, I will go to the next slide. Because when I was working on this presentation, I searched the term leadership definition, right? And about this many, I won't even attempt to say this number because I don't even know what this number is, but it's a huge one. This many results came up in 52 seconds. So yes, like the first answer that I got about leadership, which was like that it was more complex, it really is. There isn't necessarily one set definition that we have about leadership. And there's been about 15,000 books on leadership in print just here in the United States, right? So now I would like you to, take it in and use the chat box to let me know what kind of images come to mind when you hear the word leadership? Like, what are some of the words that, or some of the images that come to your mind when you hear this word? And then again, you can use the chat box to let me know what you think. I'm trying to get it to pull up again. Let's see. And the chat box is not showing. Okay. Well, let's see. So what kind of images come up to mind? I'm gonna have to exit the presentation a little so I can look at the chat box. For some reason, I am unable to see the chat. Oh, there it is.
Okay.
Oh, did someone say something? Okay.
I was going to say, if you are having trouble, we can have Tanya help read them out.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful because the chat box is not showing up for me when I do present and when I click on the chat box. Okay, or Liz, or maybe you, Liz, or Tanya, can you read off the answers that people are posting?
Yeah, so if you've sent anything to Meri, please feel free to send it my way now with Liz RE. Some of the responses I do see are women, my mom, and my dad. Um, and we'll wait a few more seconds.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times, in the Latino culture especially, we often think about our family members when we think about leadership and what it means. All right. So I will assume those are all the responses. But yeah, thank you for participating. So I'll go to the next slide because I want to show you some of the images that I found when I did a Google search on images about leadership, right? And these were some of the images that came up. If you could see like this one, for example, there's like 7 people. It looks like only one of them is like the leader. Here you see a bunch of people running behind this person who has a flag, who is signaling that this person is probably the leader. Then you have this other image over here, and then there's this person highlighted who is also being identified as the leader. Same thing here, bunch of people following this woman who has the flag. And this one here is the same thing. And then this other image, you see that the person in the forefront is the person who's highlighted. And then here we see once again that there's one leader and there is followers, right? And I wanted to show these images because what these images are trying to communicate to us, or the message that they're sending to us, is that there is one person who's a leader and the rest are followers, right? And I think that with leadership in a lot of different spaces, that's what we think of, right? Like, oh, who's the president or who's the person who's leading this group. And so these images continue to feed this idea that there's one person who's a leader, right, in a room. But today, I want you to think about leadership in a different way, because, like, for me, all of you who are in this call are leaders. And today, I want to present to you a new definition about leadership. And the reason why I think that all of you are leaders is because all of you are taking the action to lead your own life. And I believe that's what makes you a leader and what makes each one of us leader here, right? So an example of leadership could be when, for example, you're in high school, right? And you're going off to college. You have to make the decision of like, which college am I going to, right? And also you are going to be the person who's going to have like the greatest impact in what you decide to do, you know, after high school, or even just from middle school to high school. I know that a lot of the times the school district allows you to choose which high school you want to go to. And so making those small decisions about like, should I go to this high school here or this high school here? Those are the actions that makes you a leader in your own life. And so for me, that's why I say like everyone in this room is a leader, because everybody's taking actions to lead their own life, right? Another example that I have is, let's say for example, a person who's in a toxic relationship, right? They have two options, whether to be stay in a toxic relationship or to get out of that situation, right? And I think that despite of like people telling you you're in a toxic relationship, or your family, your friends, ultimately it is your action that's going to get you out of that toxic relationship, and it is you who is going to, you know, step up and make that decision. And so that's what makes you a leader in your own life, to be able to take these actions and find where you want to go, where you want to lead yourself, right? Another example of this could be, you know, let's say for example, you want to learn how to be like a better runner, right? Or you don't even run, but you're like, you know, I think I need to be more active right now, especially during quarantine where people are at their house right now. You can't even go to school. The only places that you can go to is like the store, the grocery store. Um, and so making the decision to say, you know what, like I'm gonna start going out to walk more or to start running because I need that physical activity. Making those decisions is what makes you a leader, right? And so now we're gonna move on to the other conversation, which I think is really important too, right? Leadership is important, but what about self-care? And so now we're gonna begin this conversation about self-care. Um, and so when you hear the word self-care, what do you think about? What are the images that come to mind when you hear this word? And then if Liz can read those off, that would be great.
So just a reminder, if you have any responses, feel free to send them my way and I will read them out loud.
Yes, because the chat box is not showing for me when I present and I try to pull up the chat box. So right now we're transitioning from talking about leadership, right? And now what does self-care mean to you? What do you
Yes.
think?
So some of the responses we're getting is health, trying your best to be on a healthy mindset, taking time to think about you and help your brain relax, and then mental health, um, meditation.
Awesome. Those are really good responses, actually. So now that you talk a little bit about what kind of images you get or like what it means to you, where do you think that this term came from? Where do you think that self-care came from?
I'm gonna read some of the other responses I've gotten. For self care, checking in on yourself and making sure you're okay, eating healthy, prioritizing your energy sometimes can mean saying no.
Mhm. Awesome. Okay, so and now tell us where do you think this term self-care came from? Like which field?
Someone said psychology.
Psychology. That's a good guess. Where else? Self-care. Where do you imagine that it came from? And I know this one is a little bit harder, but any guesses are welcome.
Another person said sociology, and someone else said neurology.
All right. Well, those are really good guesses. So now I'm gonna give you before we start talking about like the history of self-care. Um, I wanted to also share that when I was creating this presentation, I went on the web and I searched self-care, and this is about how many results I got in 57 seconds. Like this is a crazy number, and it's really interesting because I think also self-care is another of those terms that are very like complex, right? There's not necessarily like a set definition of self-care, right? There's like so many different definitions that we use to describe self-care. So now let's talk a little bit about the images on Google, um, because like the definitions that are out there for self-care, when I go to Google search images, these are some of the images that I found. And this just also reflects how there isn't necessarily one set definition for self-care, right? Like there's not one symbol, like how we saw it for leadership, that almost every picture was sending the same message of like one person in the room is a leader, which I already told you, like, I don't think that's necessarily the case for leadership. Like there's leadership in your own life. But with self-care, I think it's like self-explanatory, right? With the own term, like self-care. But then at the same time, I feel like the like social media and like the web and like other infographics struggle to send us a message of like what does self-care mean? Because self-care is a little bit more complex. It also depends on the person and how you're gonna take care of yourself, right? But I wanted to share these images because it reflects how like it is so complex and there's not necessarily one way to explain it with an image. And there's not like the same image that's sending the same message over and over. Like these two are pretty similar, right? But then these ones is like, it's just more like words that are trying to send a message. So I wanted to share those images with you so you could see like what's out there in the social media. But let's talk a little bit about the history of self-care. So the term self-care is a fairly new term that is being used more often now. And self-care was actually a theory that came from the nursing school, and it was developed by Dorothea Orem between 1959 and 2001. And yes, it was a term created and developed by a nurse. This lady wasn't a nurse. She passed away in 2007. But yeah, this term has been used more outside of the field of nursing just recently, but it's also been used in a lot as a marketing sort of campaign, right? Um, and I say this, I think this is really important to acknowledge that it has been used more frequently now, the term self-care, but in a way to try to make us to buy products, to make ourselves feel better, to feel like, oh, we're actually taking care of ourselves. So why is understanding self-care important? Understanding self-care is important because, like I said, corporate America is taking advantage of this new term to sell us products. And this is dangerous because it is giving people the illusion that they are actually taking care of themselves when they're really not, right? Like they'll try to sell you products for beauty or like this and that, all right? But I think that a lot of those things are more about self-grooming. It's not necessarily taking care of yourself. Like different products like hair shampoo or like shoes or clothes. That is not necessarily self-care. It's more like grooming yourself or just wanting to look fly. I don't know. I don't know what words y'all use anymore to call yourselves, like you're fly or whatever. I don't know what other terms are out there, but that's the one I remember. My days of being a young person. Okay, so the nurses, or this nurse who created this theory or this idea of self-care, she defined it as individuals attending to themselves. So that would be the agent of the action, and dealing with themselves, the focus of the action. So in order for an individual to take action, though, one must first identify, formulate, and express regulations required by human functioning and human development. So I know this is like really packed, and there's probably some words that you're like, those are really big words. Essentially, what this is telling us is that, let's say, for example, right, if I'm going to take care of myself, like I am the agent of the action, and the focus of the action would be what I am doing, right, to take care of myself. Um, and I think it was really cool how the nurses came up with this concept, right? Because back in the 1950s, the nurses realized that they were burning out because sometimes they had to take care of people who were like diabetic, right? For example. And they noticed that they were burning out. And so this nurse, that's why she came up with this theory of like, you know what, if the patients are sick and we're burning out and we're getting sick because we're not taking care of ourselves, who's going to take care of ourselves? And then who's going to take care of them? And so they developed this idea of like self-care because they wanted to also teach their patients how to be more independent with their self-care, right? And they also wanted to take care of themselves, right? Because I know that all of you have heard this before, but they say that if you can't take care of others if you don't take care of yourself first, right? And so that's essentially how they were thinking about this whole new different idea of self-care. They were like, well, we have to take care of ourselves, and we also have to help them become a little bit more independent from us so they can know how to take care of themselves, right? And so with that being said, there's two requirements for self-care. One of them is the essential enduring requirements and situation-specific requirement. And like I said, these are also two big words, but the first one, so the essential enduring requirements, an example of that could be like the example of someone who has diabetes, right? It like in like the word essential, what it's telling us is that Like, for example, someone who has diabetes, they need to inject themselves with insulin, because if they don't do it, their sugar levels could either be really high or really low, and that could be fatal for that person, right? And so essential means that you need that, like those type of medicine is essential for your health. And that's like the first type of self-care. The second type of self-care is called situation specific requirement. An example of that would be you are really stressed out about an exam, a math exam, let's say, and you feel so much stress, and because this situation is causing you to feel stressed. So how do you deal with the stress, and how you go about, dealing with that stress so that you could feel better and pay attention with your own studying? That would be an example of a situation specific requirement, right? Whether you're like, look, I'm just gonna step away from my paper, and I'm just gonna take some deep breaths, go outside for a little, and just tell myself that this is not the end of the world. If I fail this exam, my grade might go down a little bit, but nobody's gonna die. I'm not gonna die. Nothing really bad is gonna happen. Just telling yourself those things might help you reduce your stress and feel that, hey, everything is gonna be okay. This stress is unnecessary. So I'm just gonna, you know, just help myself to release and feel a little bit more relieved about the stress that I'm feeling about this exam. So that's like an example. So like the essential one is when you have like an illness or like a health condition. And situation specific is like when something happens and either your stress or anxiety or frustration, they arise because there was something that happened, right? And so once the nurses started to study this more, they realized that when you use active regulation on either essential enduring requirements and situation specific requirements, there are there's like positive outcomes that come out of you being actively engaging with those self-care needs that you have. So that's a little bit about self-care and the history of it. And fun fact, when I was doing my undergrad degree in psychology, I needed to do a research, and I was really interested in self-care because I was like, oh my gosh, I hear it so much. I want to learn more about it, but like in a scientific, I guess, like setting. And so that was the topic that I decided I wanted to do my research on. And it was really interesting learning about where this term came from, right? And how it was developed, because I think that a lot of times, like I said, we feel like maybe self-care is something that might be like, oh, I'm gonna eat a lot of the food that I like, or I'm going to go shopping, or I'm going to do these other things that may not necessarily be self-care, right? Okay, so now that you know a little bit about the history of self-care and what it is, I'm gonna play this video, and then you are going to pay attention to it, and then tell me when you, oh no, I don't want to do that. I want to do this one. Okay, so when you watch this, pay attention to what these high schoolers are talking about and like the different practices that they're using to do self-care, okay? And then when we come back, we could discuss a little bit more about self-care. So I'm gonna share this now, and then you can watch it.
So I like to say that it's like, there's like 2 mental breakdowns a year, like 1 every semester, easy. But it's like you get kind of worn out all the time from just like nonstop work.
My name is Andrew Harris.
I'm Lucy.
My friends call me Sebi.
Okay, I will we'll turn it up a little bit more.
Mi nombre es Cristian Bucio.
My name is Mia, and I'm a sophomore in 10th grade.
So I'm in PACE, which is like a college prep program. You're surrounded by like super smart people. You're in like a super smart program. I think I definitely put a lot of pressure on myself.
The most stressful thing is keeping up in all my classes because I have a lot of problems making blood cells, and my bone marrow just doesn't produce that much. Sometimes when I do miss a day, it can seem like I missed a whole week.
Este año es muy pesado para decir porque necesitamos encontrar un colegio y nosotros lo tenemos que hacer nosotros mismos porque no hay nadie que nos pueda ayudar para escoger cuál colegio queremos. Esa decisión es de nosotros.
You see everyone else like applying to colleges already, turning in their applications, and yet I know that I can't exactly do that because for me, my option is community college because it's something that I know I can pay for myself. My dad already explained to me how he can't pay for it. I didn't expect him to.
Stress to me is parents fighting. When I'm in school, I see other kids who sometimes deal with the same thing where their parents just aren't getting along, and I'm like, I'm in the same boat with you guys. There's going to come to a point where I have to choose, am I going to be with my mom for the rest of my life, or am I going to be with my dad for the rest of my life? And I'm not looking forward to that decision. Pues es un gran como peso en mis hombros también porque nadie en mi familia ha ido a colegio. So, yo y mi hermanita chiquita vamos a ser los primeros, pero yo especialmente porque yo ya voy a entrar.
Like I have to take a step back or just like cry it out a little every now and then. But just because it's like you shouldn't be able or you shouldn't have to handle that pressure. So I think self-care for me, it's like, okay, I'm gonna watch a show on Netflix after school because I can take my mind away from anything that's happened during the day.
I have a group of three friends that I hang out with, and we always go do something over the weekends. Two of them are in the same situation as me, and they know what it's like, and so we always talk about, oh, it's okay, you just gotta get through the next day, and then you get through that week, and then the month, and the year.
Of course, when I don't always have my friends around. Working out is for sure a great thing for me. It helps clear my mind, think about other things, or if I need to, think about what's stressing me out.
3 years ago when I got sick, I was by myself a lot, so it was just something fun, treating myself, getting my nails done, getting a facial, because if you look nice on the outside, it helps you feel a lot better inside.
There's somebody who's greater than everything that's going on right now. Usually I would close my eyes and just kind of talk in my head like, God, I'm in a stressful situation right now. I don't know what's going to happen in the next few days, but whatever it is, can you guide me through it? Es más fácil, muy más fácil para hablar con mi perro que hablando con mis padres o con mis amigos. Le digo cosas como, ¿qué voy a hacer, buddy? Dime qué hacer, buddy, ¿qué colegio agarro? Porque a veces si le digo a mi mom que no me siento bien o que me siento deprimido, ella no entiende o no quiere entender. Yo me imagino que no entiende porque si le digo que me siento triste, ella nomás va a decir, oh, ve con tus amigos, o es porque estás aburrido, o haz que hacer porque estás aburrido. Pero el buddy es más fácil porque él no me va a decir nada, él nomás me escucha, me entiende y ahí está para que lo abrace.
All right. So now that you watched this video, what were some of the things that you thought that they were doing to take care of themselves? And you could drop it in the chat box. Like what did you see they were doing to take care of themselves? Like what kind of practices were they doing?
Someone said painting their nails, spending time with their pets.
Yeah. What other things did you notice they would do to take care of themselves?
Talk to their friends, spend time alone, talk about it, taking their mind off of what's stressing them. Watching their favorite shows.
Mm-hmm. What others did you see? Okay, so if any other come, let me know. But yes, so I think some of them were painting their nails, spending time with their pets, talking with others, watching shows. And I thought this video was really interesting and I wanted to show it to everyone because this is really interesting how they have like different ideas of what self-care is, right, to them. And so, for example, you know, like painting their nails, I feel like it's more about like treating themselves, right? And I think the girl did say that there is times where when you look good on the outside, like it makes you feel good on the inside. And I think like in that case, that could be self-care, right? Like if you feel like, oh, if I'm groomed, I feel good. Like I feel good inside. That is a way of self-care. If feeling groomed and like clean and nice, that's what makes you feel good. And then that could be a form of self-care. But there are a lot of the times, right? Like for example, watching Netflix, because that was one of the examples that they talked about and the things that they do. I think that that's not necessarily a form of self-care because like right after she said that she was watching Netflix, she also said that it was a way to get her mind out of the things that she was thinking about. And so it was basically like her watching TV to numb whatever else was happening, right? And so that was not necessarily actively taking care of herself, but it was rather more like, oh, I don't want to think about this, I'm gonna watch Netflix, right? And so that is not necessarily like actively taking care of yourself, but rather saving it for later. So now I'm gonna ask some questions because I think that everybody's in the right path of understanding like what is self-care and what is not. So you just answered yes or no. So the question that I have here is, do you think that talking to someone you trust about something that's happening is self-care? And you can say yes or no. So read it again. Do you think that talking to someone you trust is self-care?
So far we have three
Yes.
yeses, four yeses.
Okay. What about, do you think that exercising is self-care? Exercising, is that self-care or is that not self-care?
We have two yeses, three yeses.
Ooh, okay. What about, do you think that putting makeup on is a form of self-care?
We have three yeses so far,
Okay.
four yeses.
Do you think that going shopping is self-care?
Two yeses. Someone said no, question mark?
Yeah, I think like this one is a tricky one, right? Like going out shopping. And I think it just like, it depends also on the person. If that is what makes them feel good, and if it's actually actively taking care of that need, right, then it is a form of self-care. Like if you're out of clothes and you're like, I'm gonna go shopping because I need to take care of myself. Like, I don't have calzones. You're gonna go shopping. That's a good way to look at it, right? Of like, yes, I need to take care of myself. I need this. These are essential for me to feel better. So that one is a tricky one. It also really depends on the situation and the person and how they view that type of self-care. The next one, do you think that eating a lot of your favorite food is self-care? Self-care. Eating a lot of your favorite food. Let's say your favorite food is, I don't know, pizza. You think that's a form of self-care?
Someone asked if you could repeat the question.
Oh, yes. So do you think that eating a lot of food, like your favorite food, for example, pizza, if eating a lot of pizza is a form of self-care? So like, you're like, I'm gonna eat a lot of pizza. I'm gonna sit down and eat a lot of pizza because it's my favorite. And I just feel so sad and I will take care of myself.
So far, we have 2 no's. And then someone said, I would say no, with a slanted face.
Yeah, I think, with also self-care is about like actually taking care of yourself and your health. And so if you eat a lot of like pizza, for example, maybe throughout like a month, if you're like, dang, this month I'm gonna treat myself to pizza every week because I'm doing really good in school, and I'm gonna treat myself to a slice of pizza, the pineapple and ham pizza. Or if you don't like it, you're more of like a veggie type of person, or pepperoni, that's okay. But if you sit down and eat like a whole pizza and then you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm taking care of myself because this is what I love, this is what makes me happy, then it's probably not necessarily self-care, and that's more like leaning towards like a sort of what is it called, like an eating disorder, binge eating. So eating, yes.
Someone shared, I think eating your favorite foods is self-care, but overeating isn't a healthy type of self-care.
Exactly. See, you're getting it. That's so cool that you are getting that. What I'm trying to share with you, my knowledge. um, so let's say, for example, do you think that somebody with allergies, if they take their pills, is that a form of self-care? Like taking your pills for allergies? Yes, and that type of self-care is a specific type of self-care called essential requisite self-care, which means that you need them to feel good, like physically good, because if not, you're just sneezing and sneezing and sneezing. Okay, the last one, which is very important. Do you think that brushing your teeth is self-care? Brushing your teeth night or morning, once or twice a day.
People are saying yes.
Awesome. Brush your teeth. Drink water. Water. Oh my gosh. Water is a very important type of self-care too. Hydrate. All right. This is really good. I'm excited. All right. So now we are going to do another little discussion. Well, we did it from the clip actually. Never mind. I was like, exercise from the clip, which we already did. And you use the chat box. So thank you for your participation. It was really good to talk about self-care, which is really important. And so one thing to remember is the difference between essential enduring requirements for self-care and situation-specific requirements. The first one, like I said, this is a type of self-care when you are ill or you have a health condition, right? Like making sure that you take your allergy pills, or making sure that you take, I don't know, what other, like your insulin. Like this is a form of self-care, and that's a specific type of self-care. The situation specific requirement, this is a type of self-care when there's like a specific situation causing you stress or anger, sadness, anxiety, or that is affecting your sleep or your eating habits, etc. It's like there's a situation that happened and now it's like impacting you in one way or another. And now you have to actively know, like, okay, I'm really angry. I'm in a journal right now, right? Like that would be a way to actively be taking care of yourself and not letting your anger go to like another escalation or to like get to a point where it's like, oh my gosh, I hurt somebody, you know? So that's another type of like self-care, just like being able to control like those emotions that arise when something happens. And stress is a very, very important one because actually next Friday we will be having a presenter who's going to be talking about stress. And this is another reason why I wanted to introduce the concept of self-care, because our next speaker is going to talk about stress and how stress can have like multiple impacts in your life if you don't like cope with it effectively. Um, but that's a little sneak peek of next presentation. Um, so some takeaways from my presentation that I hope you can remember is that leader, I want you to start thinking of leader as the action of making decisions in your own life. I would like for you to start thinking of yourselves as leaders, right? Like you don't have to have a pack of people behind you, or you need to have like 20 followers or anything. You all are leaders. And actually, I think that the best leaders are the ones who lead from behind. They're making sure that everybody is like going the right direction, right? Um, but that's a conversation for another day. That's another type of leadership. But today, I want you to take this away and to start implementing this new definition of leadership, which would be the action of making decisions in your own life. The other takeaway that I hope that you take from this presentation is about self-care, which is the action of identifying, formulating, and attending to specific regulations required by humans functioning and development. So essential and specific, situation specific. Remember those two because it's really important that you understand the different types of self-care so that you are able to better implement them in your life. And that's all for me. Thank you so much for tuning in, listening to this presentation, and I hope you learned something new today. That's my email. And if you have any questions about anything that I talked today, I would be more than happy to talk to you about anything.
Yay! Thank you, Medi. So if you all want to join me in giving Medi a round of applause, you can use your reactions. Thank you for presenting that and talking about self-care with all of us. We'll take the next few minutes if you all have any questions for Medi regarding self-care or leadership. Please feel free to send them in the chat and we will ask them to Medi.
Yeah, let me know if you have any questions right now about anything that I talked about today. I'd be happy to answer any of those questions.
Someone sent a question saying, how do you practice self-care, Medi?
How do I practice self-care? Yeah, that's important. How do I practice self-care? I drink a lot of water. I make sure I drink one of these every day. It's 40 ounces. I do that every single day because it also helps my skin feel really hydrated and nice. So I drink a lot of water, and believe it or not, water does actually impact how your skin, like your facial skin feels. So make sure to do that. I also go on a 2-hour mile run every other day. And I go hiking with friends or family. I really, really enjoy just being out in nature and just enjoying that moment. That's when I feel the most happiest, just being out in nature and just living that very moment. So that's how I take care of myself. And I also journal. I love journaling.
Another question we received is, how can we explore new self-care routines in COVID-19 times?
Yes, that's a very important question. So I would say, there's like there's some this little pills, right? And this would be more like the type of self-care that I was talking about, right? Of like enduring or essential self-care practices. Taking vitamins, I think, is really important because it really helps your immune system. So like, and also being out in the sun, because being out in the sun gives you vitamin D, and vitamin D is really important for your immune system to be strong. um, Another thing would be, right now we are all staying at home, right? Like, I would imagine that all of us in the state of Washington are doing school online. So, going out for a walk, maybe a mile walk every other day would really help you, because our bodies are used to having at least like some steps per day, but now it's like the only places that you go to is like the grocery store with your parents. So I would say taking some vitamins, going out to get sun, um uh, walking. And another thing I would recommend is journaling. Just talking about like how you're feeling and just like writing it down. It really helps you to like process like what's going on around you. Um, is a really, really, really good way to process everything, because I know that right now all of us are at home with our parents, our siblings, and it could be overwhelming, and that's okay. To want to have some sort of like privacy, and put your headphones, start journaling, writing about like, oh my gosh, I just want some privacy. It could be really helpful.
Another one of the questions we received is kind of along the lines of what you were just discussing. Aside from, so with journaling, what writing prompts do you follow? So are there any other prompts you follow when you're journaling?
Yeah, so I have a journal. I don't have it in front of me, but it's somewhere over there next to my bed. Um, I started a journal where I have like at the end, like I have some goals, right? Like I wrote some goals. One of them was like, I want to start painting more. I want to start like um, going out for runs more. And like I set some goals for myself at the end of the journal. I have a notebook here in front of me. So like at the end, that's where I wrote like different goals. And then at the beginning, I started writing like different ways that I'm reaching my goals. So like some of my goals right now is to run more, to go out on hikes more, to start painting more, to also read more, and actually like so that those are the goals at the end. And then at the beginning, I just have like, I talk about how I'm progressing and how I'm making sure that I am making progress in my goals. And so that's what I have been doing. Like I just write about my goals and like how I'm progressing, and if I feel like I need to make some adjustments. I write about that, but I don't necessarily have like a set prompt. Sometimes like I want to write about like how I'm feeling. Like if I'm feeling upset, like what is making me upset, and I just start writing and writing, and then eventually it comes out. Like, oh, this is why I'm upset. Okay, and then it just helps me like process that. Yeah, but that's how I've been doing my journaling.
Thank you, Medi. Those were all the questions I received.
Awesome. I hope my knowledge helps everyone.
Yeah.
One way or another.
So if you all want to help me give Medi one more round of applause, please use your